I'm Georgina Jalbo from Lexis PSL Private Client, and I'm delighted to welcome back Natalie Martin, a Senior Manager in PwC's Private Client team. And Natalie is going to talk to us today about the new Register of Persons with Significant Control. So thanks for coming back, Natalie.
Thank you.
By way of background, could you just explain what the new PSC register is and who it applies to?
Sure, the new PSC register, or Persons of Significant Control register, is a new statutory register which most UK companies and LLPs will be required to keep from April 2016. And it's to ensure that the individuals who ultimately control those corporates can be identified and that their holdings are made public. So the register itself will be available for public inspection and will be searchable online via Companies House. It will impact all UK corporates and LLPs, but there is an exception for those UK corporates who are publicly listed and already have other disclosure requirements.
Okay, and why is this change being brought in?
Well, individuals who, or the individual who ultimately control companies, are sometimes quite different from those individuals who are listed on the share registers. So the aim of this register is really so that people who do business with companies can understand who actually controls that company and who actually owns it. So it will look through tiers of ownership. The second aim is so that it can address criminal activity. It's aimed at money laundering and tax evasion and other similar offences. And that's really part of the government's obligation to satisfy their obligations under the 4th Money Laundering Directive, which will come in across the EU in 2017.
And how is a PSC defined?
So there are a number of different criteria. The first one is that the person holds 25% or more of the share capital, or is entitled to 25% or more of the profits of an LLP. The second is that the person holds the right to appoint or remove board members, so they have the majority of the voting rights on the board, or they hold 25% or more of the voting rights of board. Fourthly, they can have the right to or actually exercise significant control. And then the last criteria is that they have the right to exercise or actually exercise significant control over a trust or firm that is not a legal entity, but which itself satisfies one of those first 4 conditions.
Okay, and so what actually amounts to significant influence or control?
Well, at the moment, we just don't know. We're actually waiting on guidance to be issued to tell us what that might mean, and we expect that to be issued fairly shortly.
Okay. And how do the rules apply to group structures?
So where a legal entity would be regarded as having significant control over a company if it were an individual, then provided that that legal entity is itself under a disclosure obligation, then the company concerned won't have to enter any other details other than that particular entity within its PSC. It won't have to look through the corporate chain, for example, to identify the ultimate individual. However, where the legal entity isn't under the obligation itself to maintain a register, so for example if it's a foreign company, then the company in the UK would have to keep looking through those tiers of ownership in order to identify the ultimate controller.
Okay, and do we know yet how the PSC register will affect trustee shareholders?
Again, this is another unknown. Trustee shareholders themselves will likely have to register as PSCs. What we're not clear on is how that will impact settlers and protectors. So for example, if someone has the ability to appoint or remove trustees, then it may be that they themselves have significant control and they may be PSCs.
Right, okay. And what are the obligations on the corporate and on the PSCs?
So there are positive, proactive obligations on both corporates and the PSCs themselves. The corporates must take reasonable steps to identify who their PSCs are and who should be on their register, and they then have to maintain that register. And failure to comply with those obligations could result in criminal liability both for the corporate and their directors. The PSCs, so the registrable persons, they must respond to information requests and notices to provide that information. If they don't, a corporate is able to freeze their interest in the corporate, so effectively they could lose the right to dividends, voting rights and other rights, whilst they're not compliant.
And so, in light of all of this, what actions should be taken now?
So there are some details still outstanding.
Yes.
What is a person of significant control? And until that guidance is with us, we just don't know the full impact. But given the short implementation timeline, I think corporates and indeed PSCs have to take some action now. So the major issue facing corporates and LLPs will be to put in place the processes to enable them to create their register and maintain it effectively. So they'll need to compile a lot of information. So firstly, corporates will need to start looking at who their PSCs potentially are, so going through those qualifying conditions, and then also through structures looking at JVs, trust documents, to see who may have control or influence.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie, for such a clear summary of these new requirements, and we look forward to reading the guidance when it's released.
Thank you.
Thank you.